Welcome everybody to Relapse Prevention, how to explore the early warning signs of psychosis. Today's webinar is a collaboration between service members of the Northeast Mental Health Service Coordination Alliance, NEMSCA, Nexus Dual Diagnosis Consultation Service, Monash University, with a special thank you to the Eastern Melbourne PHN. Today we are meeting on Slido. This allows you, the participant, to interact with us. You will see in the right-hand corner of your screen, you have the option to type a question into the Q&A function or answer a poll. In the Q&A function, you can like or upvote other people's questions. The top voted questions will be addressed in the Q&A segment of this webinar. If you can't see these functions, try going to slido.com and entering the code 95080. If you're having technical difficulties, there is a link to your tech support in your recent Eventbrite registration email. There is also a Q&A moderator behind the scenes to answer your questions. It is important that we acknowledge that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are the traditional custodians of the land we meet on today. This land was never ceded but stolen. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander person that is watching today. We would also like to recognise the important contribution to the design and delivery of health and community services by people with a lived experience and their supports. I'll now hand over to Simon Cruz from Nexus Dual Diagnosis Consultation Service, who is going to talk a little bit about the back in the saddle model. Over to you, Simon.
Thanks, Sarah. So I'm Simon Cruz from Nexus Dual Diagnosis Consultation Service. I first came across the back in the saddle model, or BITS as it's commonly known, some years ago when Simon Laxton introduced me to it. I think it's an excellent model for exploring issues that may lead to relapse and then using this information to support the consumer to have a consumer-centred, strengths and recovery-focused relapse plan. Whilst it is mostly focused on psychosis, I'm sure the basic principle of it, which is that of exploring things over a timeline, could be adapted to other circumstances. I think it has great practical application to many areas of the health workforce. I think too often in health and other welfare services, staff are told what to do rather than how to do it. For example, staff may be expected to do relapse prevention plans without being taught how to do them. And I think this is a bit unfair on staff and consumers. It also means that the service has no consistency in how relapse prevention is done. Having something such as the BITS model can actually give staff a skill they can use with consumers, and this has a number of impacts. One is that staff members feel more confident and knowledgeable. Secondly, it also helps consumers feel more knowledgeable and confident in the staff members' ability to support their recovery. And thirdly, it provides a consistent approach for the service. So I'm excited to introduce to you Simon Laxton, who will be demonstrating the BITS model, and Dr. Melissa Petrakis from Monash University, who has a background working in early psychosis and supports the use of this model. The BITS model has been around for 20 years and is still relevant to practice today. So I hope you enjoy the demonstration and we'll see you in the Q&A. Enjoy.
Welcome to this segment in the presentation today where we talk about the literature that underpins the back in the saddle model and a little bit around why we need a relapse prevention model in psychosis. It's been my pleasure to work alongside Simon Laxton at St Vincent's Hospital in Melbourne now for more than a decade, and to see how this particular model of relapse prevention is really useful to clinicians and to consumers in how we work with them in clinical practice, in addition to it being a really strong evidence-informed model from research. What I want to share around why a relapse prevention planning model is important is a little bit of the research literature around relapse prevention rates. So basically, different researchers or research groups have found that between 70 to 100%, in fact, of people who experience a first episode of psychosis will experience a relapse over time. So you can see from this slide that some researchers have found that it's about 70 to 80%. Others have found that within that first 2 years, it can be as high as 96%, or again, a figure of around 70%, but that over time, across a 10-year period, that likelihood or possibility of relapse can increase again up to about 85%. Relapse prevention plans are really important in early psychosis and are very common in Australia and internationally because of how they can help a consumer have a sense of control or predictability about understanding what triggers or experiences might lead to a relapse, and then some control about what they can expect or what might be beneficial if a relapse occurs. So relapse prevention planning can promote early detection of illness, and it can decrease duration of untreated illness. It can lead to prevention planning can lead to rapid recovery from symptoms of first episode or early psychosis. It can reduce the frequency and severity of further episodes over time if you have a good plan and if that plan is faithfully implemented. And as Shepherd and colleagues note, relapse prevention is crucial as early relapse may result in the growth of residual symptoms. So less complete recovery over time can be a problem. Cognitive therapy has been found to reduce time of recovery from psychosis by 25 to 50%. So that's a real gain if we can utilise cognitive approaches alongside medical approaches or medicine-based approaches. I'll now hand over to Simon to explain a little bit more about the origins of the model and how the model works in practice.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the back in the saddle model, which was developed by Max Birchwood from the UK. It's a CBT-based model. It really looks at recognizing a relapse signature, then developing a relapse prevention plan, and then doing a relapse drill with your client so that you both know what to do and what interventions need to happen should relapse occur. One of the main words I think when talking about this is collaboration. That's a particular focus. This isn't something that you're telling your client how to do relapse. It's really working with them collaboratively to recognize what those early warning signs are and to develop a plan. There's a particularly good article from 2000 from the Advances in Psychiatric Treatment, where Birchwood, Spencer and McGovern beautifully illustrate how to use their tool. But there's even within the article, they list the relapse prevention cards that are used when you're working on this model, so that you can print your own cards off. Yes, yeah, fantastic article. There's 5 main areas of back in the saddle. The first is really looking at how engagement and education. There's 2 things obviously happening there. The engagement, I think the model, I've used it for many years, and it's a really good way of engaging with your client and educating them and also yourself about what their early warning signs are. It certainly helps to identify what these are. Again, to develop this relapse signature, looking at the things that are occurring prior to somebody actually becoming psychotic, so you can intervene early, and it gives you the chance to do this exercise together. So it's person-centered. The client is definitely in the driver's seat, and you're definitely working closely together. You're looking at what the client has used in the past and what works for them. It helps strike up those conversations between mental health and your diagnosis between substance use. It supports the client to look at their own coping strategies, what they've used in the past, what has worked for them. As I've already mentioned, it's a remarkable tool for self-learning, for discovery. And I've certainly shared the tools, obviously, with the colleagues I work with, but my clients have shared it with housemates, family, with their GPs. It can really help to educate everybody around what the specific features of that client's illness.
Thanks, Simon. We'll now move to a demonstration of Simon using the BITS model, and we'll rejoin you a bit later for a Q&A.
thanks for coming in today. So we're going to start off by looking at the timeline, I suppose, looking at the event. And initially what we're going to do is we're going to start from probably when things were at their worst and work backwards. But although we will be looking at your symptoms, but what we're actually going to look at to start off with is just the events that were happening in your life. Yeah? So when do you think things were at their worst?
Things were probably at their lowest for me when I went to see the GP for help.
Okay, so let's put the GP. And when was that? Well,
That was August.
August, the end of August, I think, wasn't it? Yeah, okay. Like I said, we're going to do a timeline, like going from there, going backwards. And again, just looking at those events. So the kind of things that are happening in your life prior to that, what was happening prior to you going to the GP?
I'd moved to Melbourne from Geelong to stay with my brother.
Okay.
Just had to get out of Geelong.
How long was that before you went to the GP?
It was probably about a month, so
Okay,
it would have been
okay.
maybe end of July, start August.
Okay. So it's at Geelong, yeah?
Yeah.
Looking at the kind of the events in your life prior to you sort of visiting the GP at the end of August, were there other events going on in your life?
Before I left Geelong, I got evicted from my accommodation.
Oh no.
Yeah, basically I worked in contracting, which is for my IT, and
I'm just going to stop you just there just for a second. So you got evicted from your accommodation.
Yeah.
Was that would have been around the same time?
yeah,
Okay.
so they were like,
Okay. Sorry, you were saying you work in IT and contracting.
yeah, and it's a real hard job to get stable working, so I just wasn't getting hours, which culminated in me getting evicted. I wasn't able to pay my rent.
Any other events sort of prior to that?
Yeah, so my job, I'm a contractor for IT, so I'd say the past maybe month and a half, it was really severe.
Okay, so if we were to say probably around the end of June, so somewhere around there, yeah. And anything prior to that? Any other events?
Yeah, I stopped smoking weed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How long before the end of June was that?
I stopped smoking weed, it was the end of May.
End of May. Okay. Okay. Any other events going on?
No,
No. Okay. That's good. That's good.
that was really it.
Okay. Well, let's. Looks like there's quite a lot happening there already. So look, these cards. So I spoke about this last week. The cards are divided into thoughts, feelings, and behaviours. Is there a section that you'd like to start off with first?
Maybe I'll start with thoughts first.
Thoughts. Okay. I'll hand you the cards.
Thank you.
Any you're not sure about, just let me know.
Yeah.
And I'll try and explain what they're asking.
Thoughts are racing, no. Senses seem sharper, no. Thinking you have special powers, no. Thinking that you can read other people's minds, no. Thinking that other people can read your mind, no. Receiving personal messages from the TV or radio, yeah, this was something that happened quite a lot for me. I would have sometimes been watching TV and an advertisement would have came on, and it was from the British MI5. So
Okay. So advertisements for MI5.
yeah, they were sending me messages saying we're going to get you, we're after you. So like, it turns out I just didn't want to look near the TV. I just thought it was sending me these messages.
When was that happening? Do you think on the timeline?
It was, I'd say, just before I went to the GP when things were really bad.
So let me just think. So just about here, yeah.
Yeah.
So let's just put that there. And it's so the messages were from MI5.
Yeah.
What sort of things were they saying?
They were just telling me, they're like, we're going to get you. We know everything you've done. It's just real threatening.
Yeah, it sounds really scary.
Yeah, it was really, really bad times then.
Okay.
Having difficulty making decisions, yeah. Experienced that a lot, but I suppose really at the start, it really impacted my job as well. I just couldn't make simple decisions.
So whereabouts would you say that
Yeah,
was?
I'd say it was just around here after I stopped smoking the weed.
Oh, that was after you stopped
Yeah.
smoking. Okay. So you just having a difficult, and that was impacting on your ability to
Yeah.
work. So yeah. Okay.
Experiencing strange sensations, not really. Preoccupied with one or two things, yeah. My preoccupation just solely lay with me being targeted by MI5.
When did that start to happen?
It featured a lot throughout, but I'd say particularly towards the end when things were really bad. It was the only thing I could concentrate on.
About here?
Yeah.
So yeah, and it was just that you were thinking
I was
that.
thinking that British people were out to get me.
Okay, MI5 British people. Okay. Just carry on.
Thinking you might be somebody else. No. Seeing visions or things others cannot see. No. Thinking people are talking about you. Yeah. This was particularly at work. I just felt everybody was out to get me. I was the only Irish person there, and there was a lot of British people, and it definitely culminated on me not getting a lot of work.
When
So
was that happening?
that was just, I'd say, before losing my job. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And so the people that you thought you were talking about, I mean, were these British people, were these people that you'd got on with before? Or
Yeah, that's the thing. I never had issues with people at work.
Okay.
Really until this sort of timeline. We always really got on, and
Okay. Okay. So this is quite a change for you, yeah?
really was.
Okay. Okay.
Thinking people are against you, yeah, that ties in with that card. I suppose it was there. I just felt everybody was out to get me.
So they weren't just talking about you.
They weren't. They were out to get me.
Yeah, okay.
They were part. I felt some of them were part of MI5, and they were all collaborating together. And
Oh, wow.
it was really horrible. Having more nightmares, yeah. I've had nightmares the whole way through, but really towards the end, my nightmares were so scary. Just before I went to see the GP, I would have woke up just screaming in sweats. It was horrible.
Okay. Were there any particular theme to the nightmares?
Yeah, it was just a theme of being chased, of someone chasing me down the street, and I don't know whether it was MI5, was it someone British, but it was just that constant fear of running and being chased.
Okay.
Having difficulty concentrating, yeah, particularly it was linked to my job as well around this decision. Just the smallest thing, I couldn't concentrate on it. My mind was elsewhere all the time. It was horrible. Thinking bizarre things, yeah. Like, I know now, looking back, that it was bizarre, but at the time it didn't seem bizarre to me.
What sort of things?
Like, I'd be walking down the street and I would just be like, that man there, that man's been following me for the past 2 weeks. Like, I got these ideas in my head.
Yeah.
And,
The people were following you?
yeah.
Was it anybody particular, or was it just
Just
random people?
random people in the street. Thinking your thoughts are controlled, no. Hearing voices, yeah, sometimes I would have heard just, they're out to get you. The MI5 are here to get you, like.
Oh, wow. When was that happening?
That happened, I'd say, once I moved to Melbourne.
So around about here,
Yeah, it was, I suppose, being in a new environment didn't help either, but wasn't happening all the time. It was particularly when I was on my own and after I hadn't had much sleep.
Okay.
I found when I didn't get much sleep, the voices just were stronger.
Okay. Okay.
Thinking the part of you's changed shape, no. I think that's all the thinking cards.
Okay, you did really well. Was that okay?
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's quite confronting, but it's good to map it all out.
Now, are you right if we continue for today?
Yeah, yeah.
So we've got feelings and we've got behaviours. Which one would you prefer?
Maybe do feelings. Thank you. Feeling helpless or useless? No. Feeling afraid of going crazy? No. Feeling sad or low? Yeah. I was so sad.
Why are you feeling sad?
Just particularly, I'd say, when I got evicted from
Yeah,
my accommodation and lost a job all within that short space of time. It was just horrible. Really, really bad. Feeling anxious or restless, yeah, anxiety the whole way through, but I suppose particularly at the start. Just when I stopped smoking the weed, I couldn't settle. Like, I know weed's not good for you, but it really just helped me relax, and I just needed a break. I just knew it wasn't good for me. I was just sick of having that same routine. I just wanted something different in my life. Feeling increasingly religious, no. Feeling like you're being watched, yeah. Particularly towards the end, when we would have been thinking bizarre things. Like, I just felt that people were watching me on the street. I'd walk into a cafe and there would be people there, and they would just look up at me as if they all knew who I was. And
so you knew? What did you think? Why did you think they would?
I thought they were part of MI5. I thought it's so great. I thought most of the people in the community were part of MI5.
So everybody around you, okay.
Feeling isolated, yeah. Particularly after not getting much work. I wasn't seeing anyone, so I would have been around here, yeah. I was so lonely. Feeling tired or lacking energy, yeah. The whole way through, but I suppose definitely around this stage, just when I was lost my accommodation and just no energy whatsoever. Feeling confused or puzzled, not really. Feeling forgetful or far away, no. Feeling in another world, no. Feeling strong or powerful, no. Feeling unable to cope with everyday tasks, yeah. I suppose links into this here, just simple things just became so hard for me. Even cooking, cleaning, doing my job.
Yeah, you mentioned about the work as well, yeah. So it sounds like you're really struggling with just everyday things, yeah.
Feeling like you're being punished, no. Feeling like you cannot trust other people, yeah. Again, everybody was out to get me. I suppose I'd put that at work because that's what I was seeing around most people, and everybody at work, I couldn't trust anyone.
Okay.
I had no one. Feeling irritable, yeah, I was irritable the whole way through, but I think particularly towards the end, just before seeing the GP, I remember going to him and just letting my anger out in him and just saying, you're part of MI5 too, you're out to get me. Like, I remember roaring at him, like being really angry, and I think that was just at my lowest point. So.
Okay. Let's just put this right here, right at the end, yeah. So. Okay.
Feeling like you do not need sleep, no, I was so tired. Feeling guilty, no. Feelings, that's feelings. No.
Feelings, okay. You okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. You right if we continue?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got this last set to go through. So we've got behaviours.
Okay. Thank you. Difficulty sleeping, yeah. The whole way through, but I suppose particularly towards the end, when I was hearing the voices particularly.
Okay. You mentioned about those. So were they mainly at night then when you were hearing those? Or?
Yeah, mainly at night and mainly when I couldn't get sleep.
Okay. Okay.
Speech comes out jumbled with odd words. No. Talking or smiling to yourself. Definitely wasn't smiling that much. Acting suspiciously as if being watched, yeah. This was something I'd done quite a lot. Like I would go out and like wear disguises, like wear a hat, so like I was covert, like undercover, so nobody could see me. Like I would just wear all these strange things, like when I was out, like so.
So people couldn't see who you were?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd say particularly towards when I'd moved to Melbourne, it was really, really bad.
Okay, so that would have been around about here, yeah?
Yeah.
So wearing disguises when you're going out?
Yeah.
Okay.
Behaving oddly for no reason. I thought there was a reason, so I'm not going to say that one. Spend time alone, yeah. Particularly after, I'd say just before getting evicted, I was always by myself. I'd say here.
Okay. You already said you were feeling isolated around that time.
Yeah, so it was just another behaviour. Neglecting your appearance, no. Didn't really do that. Acting like you're somebody else, no. Not seeing people, yeah. Again, spending time alone.
Okay. So was this because you didn't want to see people, or?
It's not that I didn't want to, it's just everyone was out to get me.
Okay.
Like, I didn't trust anyone. Like, I couldn't trust anyone.
Yeah. So all your sort of former friends and.
No, I just stopped seeing everyone.
Okay.
It was much easier just to be by myself than have to worry about that.
Okay.
People out to get me.
Do you want like
Not eating. No, I still eating was my only source of comfort. Not leaving the house. Yeah, again, that would have been before I was actually evicted. I
Yeah.
wasn't leaving the house.
was there a
I had
reason?
no job. Again, just MI5 were gonna get me. The British people were gonna get me if I stepped outside my house. Behaving like a child, no. Refusing to do simple requests, no. Drinking more, no. Alcohol's never really been a big feature for me. Smoking more, no. I stopped the cannabis. Movements are slow, no. I was very erratic and fast paced. Unable to sit down for long, no. Behaving aggressively. I was never aggressive, but I was definitely angry.
You mentioned about
Yeah.
shouting at the GP.
Yeah, I suppose that would be aggressive. Like, yeah, I suppose.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I suppose it was aggressive what I done. I lost it with him. He was a British doctor, and it was like the final nail in the coffin. I just completely lost it. Yeah.
You thought he was in on the plot, and
Yeah, that's Behaviours done.
Okay. Was that okay?
Yeah, it's really good to see it all mapped out, and just, I suppose, things were really bad towards the end, and I think that shows through what was happening.
Absolutely. You can see. I think everything that's happening here. It just sounds like it was a really, really scary time. Yeah. We won't have time today, but what I thought we could do is try to sort of put this into kind of a little bit of a plan next week. So we could look at sort of the early sort of stuff over here, the middle, late, and then very late things, and just start thinking about what kind of interventions we could use, looking at things that help you cope, looking at who you might want to contact, just the stuff that does work for you, really. Start looking at that, yeah?
That'd be really good.
Okay, thanks, Breda.
Thank you so much. That was really good, Simon.
Hi, Simon. Thank you so much for that really fantastic demonstration. I know that people would have got a lot of value out of seeing that and just seeing how easy it is to do. Now, what we're going to talk about today is what do you do after you've completed the timeline exercise? So maybe you can walk us through the plan and how you developed the plan, and we can scroll down and look through this one you've made for Breda.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so thanks, Sarah. So once you sort of sat down and you've done your timeline and you've looked at all the kind of warning signs, it's then good to put them into a plan. So that would go from early warning signs, one through the middle to late,
Yes.
and then ending up into very late. The timeline on this really depends on the client and their own experiences.
Okay.
So, for example, if in Breda's case, we were talking about probably 6 months of symptoms, but that might be a lot shorter. For some clients I've worked with, that's actually been longer. But believe it or not. But so it really depends on the individual. We've gone. I won't talk about the warning signs because we've already gone over those. But just looking at the action things, often the actions, I would say normally, certainly as Breda's case manager, I'd want to know if she was exhibiting any early warning signs. But a lot of those are often they start off being non-clinical. They're often about sort of looking at supports, looking at things that you do to relax or manage stress, things that she might have done in the past. Certainly booking in appointments if she's showing early warning signs, so that a treating team can be aware of what's happening at the start. And then we kind of go through the middle ones, which is yeah, again, sort of like continuing doing the kind of psychosocial stuff about talking with friends, talking with her brother, things like reducing working hours. Some clients I've had, they've made suggestions about kind of taking time off, going away for a weekend, you know, going anything that they can do to help them sort of to relax and to de-stress. And if there are stresses that are sort of making the mental state worse, looking at ways of trying to alleviate those.
Yes.
And then, of course, we then go on in sort of like the later stuff. So by then you might be, you know, I've got in here about CAT or triage. We didn't mention parks, the prevention and recovery centres. That's something else that might be considered in all of these.
Yeah.
And often what I find is when I'm doing these with clients, often the interventions become less, not because we're thinking of less, but because I'm not sure it's necessary to kind of keep reiterating the ones that you've already got. You've got those things in place. So I wouldn't want to stop talking to the family as a case manager. That would be something that I would continuously
do.
All these. And then finally, you often end up, you know, often for clients, the experiences, you know, if we're not able to kind of keep them in check, then they could become really quite severe. And for some clients, it can be a very, very scary place, and they might want to be to get to, as it says here, often to get to a place of safety, looking at emergency and then considering the options from there. But the whole point of this plan is that hopefully, without, you know, knowing what we know, and that we would be able to avoid that happening.
And just to clarify, so obviously here in the warning signs, this is the relapse signature here. So these are all the cards that you've used through in the timeline exercise. So then would you bring back this plan? So maybe you as a clinician create the, put this into a plan, and then you'd come back with the consumer and sit down, and you would work on the strategies together as a collaboration.
Always. In fact, I would do that even when I've got the, often it can be a messy business doing the timeline. You know, there's often so much going on. So I always like to clarify. I think most of the time, in fact, it's correct, but I think it's always worth doing that just to make sure that there wasn't confusion about the details that you were getting.
Just re-clarifying that and going back through it again. Yeah.
And the interventions, we've got some sort of intervention cards that we've made up at Clarendon, well, sort of borrowed from other people, and some that we actually made up just from things that consumers have told us that they found useful.
And really good point. So sometimes if consumers can't find their own strategies, that's when we can kind of ask for permission to gently share some of those strategies. And even, like you said, having some pre-made cards already there to sort of support people to come up with those ideas.
Yeah, I think just in the same way that the cards are prompts, it's often a way of getting that discussion going. So this, one of them I got from a client I worked with was just treats, having treats, and for her that meant sort of, she was the lady about the weekends away. That kind of stuff was very important for her, but she just thought that I was giving herself a treat. But obviously that could be that just gives you the chance to enter a conversation with your client about, well, what is it for them? What for them is going to be useful? Yeah?
And that's another great point. I think that all of this is about being curious about the person you're working with, what works for them, and that can be a really great outcome for them, because they might learn a little bit about themselves, you know, what's going to work. For some people, it may be taking a bath or doing some yoga, but for other people, that's not going to work. So it's really about like a bit of self-discovery, as you talked about in the previous slides, and about some self-learning as well.
Yeah, I did have, I had one client who yoga, certainly that was on his plan, but when we shared the plan with his family, that they were kind of laughing at it, and it certainly turned out that it wasn't something that he'd ever done. He was trying to please me, but that was that's
a great point. Sometimes people might say something just to kind of please you or appease you. So I suppose being continuously curious about that. And that's why the value of sometimes sharing those plans with family support people and carers as well, because they really know the people. They are the frontline workers. They understand their family member or their loved one. So that's another really great way, if you have permission, to be able to share these plans as well.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And then everybody kind of knows what to do, which is, I mean, one of the beautiful things about this plan, I think, is that you can get it on just basically one sheet of A4, double-sided, and on the back we're looking at now just about, you'd have who the professional contacts are,
Yes.
what the triage number is, the contact details for friends or family that have been useful, that are there, looking at that support network, looking at medication that might have worked in the past. So it's all there in a two-sided sheet of paper.
That's great. And I like down the bottom that there is this area here for somebody, if they wanted to, they could sign to say that they've developed a plan with you, and that they are okay for you to implement any of the actions in the early warning signs and strategies area.
Yeah, and they've had the chance to practice that, to do the drill.
Yes.
So when these things started to happen, who would you contact? If this happened, what would you do? I think that's such an important part of the plan. Yeah.
And then I guess if this plan doesn't work for somebody in the first instance, you could go back and review it. Is that right?
Absolutely. This is one of the things about it. I mean, it's. I've heard other clinicians who prefer to call it a guide, because obviously we're never sure entirely what's going to happen when people become unwell. We know that there often is a pattern that seems to be followed, this relapse signature. But if the plan's not right, well, I've had this before with clients where I said, well, look, it's not about what happened with you. It's more, maybe it's a problem with the plan. Maybe we just need to look at the plan and maybe tighten that up a little bit, find out a little bit more, look at where we got things wrong. How could we have supported you in a better way when these things started to happen? Who might have been beneficial for you to contact? That kind of thing.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Simon. That is so great to go through that plan. And obviously this is the way that you do it, and everybody can do it in their own way, just making a template up on Word. And like you said in the beginning, the timeline is really based on what the consumer wants. So it doesn't have to necessarily be 6 months, 6 weeks, 1 week. That's right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. I think we changed this when we were kind of, when we were coming up with a timeline for our Breeder Jackson. We obviously it's all came from, I suppose, looking at the sort of clients we worked with and what's been probably normal for them,
yes,
or things, a timeline of things that we've actually seen happening, I should say. But that obviously changed. We're all individual, and for every person it would be different.
Be different.
You've got to look at what's happened for that client. Absolutely.
That's great. Okay, so if anybody else has any other questions for Simon about this relapse prevention plan, put a question into the Q&A now, because we are going to go to the live Q&A, and we'll answer some more of your questions. So thank you, Simon. I'll see you soon.
Thank you. See you soon, Sarah.
See ya. Well, welcome everybody to the Q&A section of this webinar. We really hope you enjoyed what you've seen so far. So firstly, I'd like to introduce the panel. We have Dr. Melissa Petrikis from Monash University, Simon Cruz from Nexus Dual Diagnosis Consultation Service, Simon Laxton and Clodagh Byrne from our Area Mental Health Service. So welcome everybody today. I guess we'd like a little bit of audience interaction first. So we might launch a quick poll and find out, where are you from? What sector do you work in? Or are you a consumer or a carer or a family member? So you'll see that in your Q&A section, it should pop up and you can start typing in maybe one word. And maybe let's have a look now and see if we can see some people typing away. Let's have a look up on the screen. We've got mental health. It looks like everyone's from mental health. All right, let's keep going. Okay, let's start with the first question from the Q&A. Let's have a look and see what the first question is. All right, so we'll just switch back to the questions. There we go. Okay. So for our panel, the first question is, if your client is negative towards their illness and won't admit to the possibility of episodes, how would you approach the situation? So maybe Simon Laxton, shall we start with you?
Well, thinking about it in a relapse prevention way, we'll start, well, before we even get there, I'd be probably trying to find out their understanding of what has happened, whether they think they were run well in any way. Looking at the language that they've used, I've certainly worked with clients that refer to the time when they're feeling particularly under stress, rather than, for example, being psychotic. As for the plan, I think it's always worth reiterating it. If clients don't want to do it, they don't feel prepared to do it, they're not interested in doing it, then don't do it. Simple. Just fine. That's your decision. We'll go with that.
Great point. Really about asking for permission, and really this is a choice that people have. Melissa, did you want to say a little bit more about this?
Just that we're asking someone to take a little bit of a risk and try something new. And that's true with lots of different tools that we try and use in clinical practice or community mental health. And so often we have to suggest something 2, 3, 4, 10 times before it's the right time for someone to have a go at something new, especially people who are under, quite a lot of stress and dealing with quite a lot of things. One more thing can just be too many things at a given time. But if you let the sort of idea percolate a bit, if you give them a bit more detail about what's involved, explain about the cards, explain that it's a guided conversation, explain that they don't have to do it all in one go, things like that. They're often a bit more receptive very, very soon, just not on the original day you planned, that's all.
Great, thank you so much. Well, I hope that's answered your question. So let's go to another one. Let's put the Slido back up on the screen. Okay, we've got a question from Kevin. So the BITS model looks like it would work with other issues such as overdose prevention, gambling relapse, etc. So let's start with that part of the question, I think. Maybe Simon Cruz, did you want to speak a little bit more about this model being used for other areas of mental health and AOD?
Yeah, sure. I think this type of model could be very adaptable to other situations, given its sort of timeline approach. You could plot various issues related to the build-up, the pre-time of, oh no, what am I trying to say here? You could look at the build-up of an overdose situation and plot some of those instances along a timeline, and look at a response after that as to how you might avoid that next time. You could, sorry, I hope I've answered that properly.
Well, I guess it's sort of, the timeline exercise really draws out what was going on for the person around the event. So what stresses were happening in their life, and that could be used, I guess, for in a gambling instance or with AOD or substance use. Maybe Simon Laxton, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'm just thinking I've certainly seen that similar idea used before with say drugs workers that work with people with stimulants. It might be that kind of that they have that relapse following a argument with, say, their partner, when they just happen to be walking past a dealer's house following that argument, and that sort, just recognizing those patterns.
That's a great example. Melissa, did you want to add anything to that about using this tool in other instances?
Yeah, I think you could. I really like the idea of using it with gambling, for example, as well as mental health and AOD issues. So it's essentially a tool that helps with insight-oriented approaches or insight-oriented therapy. So if it's anything going on in your life where it causes you a lot of problems, having some understanding, some little tool that gives you some understanding of what was going on before. Could I see any signs? Could I see any triggers? Was there any build up to the problems when they reach a peak? And then what happens afterwards? And how have I recovered? And I can use that. I'm stronger than I realized, more resilient than I realized. I can use that in the future too, but particularly because it's about relapse prevention, it's the before. It's that trying to get some insights into the before. So there's usually a whole bunch of things going on before someone starts excessive gambling. And there are lots of points where there could be some ways they could stop themselves from doing certain behaviours that when they're calmer or more rational, they don't really want to do. There's ways that they could have less access to as much cash, or credit cards. There's ways that they could have more involvement with others around them. That's if social support is useful, that would mean that they're not feeling as sort of lonely and vulnerable to the stimulus that gambling can bring. And that's true for mental health and AOD as well.
Oh, thank you. Those are excellent examples. Okay. The second part of that question, I think, was asking about, can you create your own cards? So Simon, what do you think, Simon Cruz, what do you think about that, sort of creating your own cards? So say if you're working out of psychosis, for example.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I guess you could create your own cards, but I would suggest that testing and getting an evidence base for those new cards would be the most appropriate way to go. But because you'd obviously need to be careful about language and phrasing and those kinds of things. But I think that ultimately this type of model could be adapted, and that possibly adding new cards could be a useful addition to this model. Yeah, but it's just about the way you go about that.
Simon Laxton, were you going to add to that?
I was going to say, I think for a while we developed some mania cards where I work, just looking about the early signs of mania. Often that can be quite good good in conjunction with the psychosis thing. I didn't really talk about those with this model today because obviously they're slightly additional to Max Birchwood's model, which
yeah. And Clodagh, can I ask you, because you are a clinician and you work with Simon Laxton, but you were on the other side of this demonstration, so you were really being the consumer. So I wanted to know, how did it feel when you were being asked those questions? How were those cards? Did you feel comfortable with the wording on the cards?
Yeah, I think because I was given the power with the cards rather than the clinician asking me the questions, I felt more comfortable to actually speak about it. So being in that position, definitely it was quite empowering as a client, and I think that's what we're trying to do in mental health, is put the power back in the clients rather than it being clinician led. So
that is such a great point. I think that's something I hadn't thought about, but actually giving somebody the cards to hold and for them to being able to go through in their own private time and having a look through and recognizing what's going to be asked rather than the clinician asking those questions. That's a great point.
I think a strong point. Yeah.
I'm not sure. Oh, sorry.
No,
there
go
was a
for
point. The behaving aggressively card. Because like I looked at it and I was like, I don't know if I was aggressive, and then just the Simon being able to gently guide me into understanding how I was without sort of making me feel bad in that way. I thought that was really powerful for a client.
Great point. Simon Cruz, did you want to add to that?
I was just going to add the collaborative nature of the model is a really important feature of it, like how the consumer and the worker work together to develop the insight. It's not just one or the other, and they're combining their knowledge to come up with the best approach possible.
Look, I sort of wanted to add to that too. I think Clodagh raised a good point about language, and I think that these cards, we can sort of play with them. If we do know that there's evidence-based practice that says we should use words that are more strength-based, like maybe getting angry rather than being aggressive, that might actually make the consumer feel a bit more comfortable. Okay, well, let's move on to another question. Let's get the Slido questions up on the screen. So how do you support consumers if you are doing a timeline and they have disclosed trauma? And there's actually a question underneath that says, I can imagine clients being triggered and distressed recalling these events. How would you proceed? Would you change your approach or toolkit at all? So I think both these questions are really talking about trauma, recalling events. So maybe Simon Laxton, could you talk about that in your practice, about people who might be recalling traumatic events, and how we approach that?
Yeah, look, well, starting off, before I'd even begin with this, I sit down, I'll meet with my clients, I'll talk to them about what it would involve. I'll even draw up pictures of what the actual plan is that we're doing, so they've got some idea, get their consent, whether they want to continue with this process, whether they want to start it. I think it gives them a chance to actually talk about what's happened, the opportunity to discuss what's happened. I think certainly I've seen some being with clients when they've felt it's kind of been it's giving them the opportunity to debrief. Often when people are becoming unwell, they're going through a number of traumatic and stressful experiences. You might have noticed when I was doing it with Clodagh that at the end of each set of cards, I'd be asking how that was, whether they'd like to continue, whether they'd like to, you know. Yes. The session we did with Clodagh, that was a pretty brief session within 20-30 minutes. But other times I've done it with clients and it might take over a number of sessions, you know. But just checking in with them all the way through and finding how they're going. I think I've only ever done it twice and I've been using this model since about 2005. I've only in that time, there's been twice when clients haven't wanted to continue. And that's, again, it's absolutely fine. Just don't push it. I just have to keep stressing this. If they're not happy doing it, fine. You know, we don't do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Simon Cruz, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that the model, like it's a powerful way to, it is a doorway to exploration, similar to how the BDA and the RFUP work. It is really just providing that platform to allow, you know, a respectful conversation. Yeah, it's good.
Melissa, did you want to add to that, the area about trauma?
Well, I was just going to say that I think sometimes as clinicians we're quite anxious to bring up something that could be explosive or distressing or re-triggering, and that we can't contain in a given meeting or therapeutic space, or that we're going to leave people more upset than when they started, things like that. So what Simon Laxton was saying about the prep work is really important. So you don't spring it on someone in one session and do it that session is something I would say is really important. You explain all about it. You might show them the cards. That's why I love the cards too. It makes it transparent. There's no sort of mystery to it. I think the more we demystify tools that we use, people can make informed choices. The more that people have choice, consumers tell us really clearly, the more that they have choice, the happier they are with the treatment that they receive. So transparency is really important. And what Clodagh was saying, I thought was so super interesting and important about the sense of empowerment. We use that word a bit glibly, but it's actually very empowering because it resets a power imbalance. It makes it more equal if the person who's going to use the cards holds the cards. And so sometimes you just might have a few sessions where you talk about it before you actually use it. And also if someone becomes upset while using it, you stop using the cards, you stop that process and you check in with them about their distress, and you make sure they're okay with them about that in any way that you can. And that might also be about bringing in other resources or planning around their distress and managing that distress, and just leave the door open. You can come back to the BITS model at another date because it's really useful. But just one other thing, I think it's a falsehood if we imagine just because people aren't talking about their trauma with us that they're not experiencing, thinking about, feeling distress over that trauma. It's just often they think we can't handle it because we don't open a door to talk about it. So I think that's really important to remember as well.
And if I could just add, having that structure, excuse me, allows that transparency, and I think that's really useful. Like if you think of having a structure as opposed to having no structure, most people who've experienced trauma would prefer the structure. So I think using the tool rather than just having a conversation off the cuff, the tool will be far more valuable.
Thank you so much. Clodagh, did you want to add anything about that from your experience from using the cards and your experience being a clinician, just around trauma?
Yeah, I think particularly it's important to remember with trauma that it can be quite a chaotic period. So even putting simple timelines, like when did this actually happen? So having that visually represented in a timeline is really powerful for someone that has experienced trauma, because they're actually able to map out and see, oh, this is when this happened. Like before I was going to the GP, that's when I was at my worst. So I think that was really important and really powerful and would be so useful in terms of having that time frame.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was a great question. All right, let's have a look at another one. Let's have a look up on the screen. Oh, this presentation is great. Will there be access to the recording? Yes, there will be. So just before we finish around 11 o'clock, I'll have a video that plays, and it will show you and guide you to the website where this webinar will be on, as well as the downloadable printable relapse prevention cards, as well as the PowerPoint slides. They also should be in your Eventbrite email as well. And it also should be a link to the journal article that this BITS model came from. So let's go to another question. Bring that up on the screen. Okay. Can you use this tool with families? That's a great question. Let's go to Simon Laxton. Did you want to talk to that?
Yeah. I think it's ideal. So what I would do, what I've done, I've used this in the past, is go develop really a rough plan with the client, and then go through it with the client and their family. That gives you the chance to, I suppose, check in with the client that there's nothing in there that they might not want their family to know about, that they're happy to disclose. And it's also been really, really good in getting the family's viewpoint on what's happened. It's again, just I had one example where with a family where it gave us a good chance to explore, I suppose, the options about how that person, when they were becoming unwell, what could happen, and having a very, very good conversation about that. The father came out, had a very, very entrenched views about his opinion about his son taking responsibility for his illness and doing the right things if he was going to become unwell. But it gave us a chance then to talk about the fact that his son, when he became unwell, the first symptoms were being elevated and not recognised he was unwell. And then actually putting that clearly in the plan: if these things start to happen, I would like my family to contact the triage number or CAT. So everybody was on the same page, really. Yeah.
And I guess that, in the relapse prevention plan, a lot of people do use family. Not all people do, but a lot of people do use family as their emergency contacts or people that are going to implement the plan. What about Simon Cruz? Did you want to talk about carers and families and support people and how this tool could be really valuable for them?
Yeah, I guess adding to what Simon just said, I think a number of families that I've worked with, they've asked me the question, how do I know when my loved one is becoming unwell? And I think using this model can give you some of those sign points to when the person is becoming unwell. So that information could be really useful for families to have, or families and carers, I should say. Yeah.
Melissa?
Actually, I was just thinking with the points that Simon Laxton and Simon Cruz were just saying, it reminds me that this could be a really useful tool for clinicians and families, actually, with an individual who's experiencing quite severe and persistent mental health challenges, work out what things would go into, like use the legal frameworks better. So work out what things would go into an advance statement. I think that there's really low uptake of advanced statements at the moment, and that's because for most of us, if you said, what would you need, or what do you, how should you be treated if this happens? That's like a worst case scenario. We can't quite picture it, or we don't quite want to picture it, or we don't really trust that we can add that level of detail that our preferences would be honoured. Whereas if you think back over for you uniquely, for the individual with the illness, for you uniquely, what happened last time, what was good, what was bad, where were there signs that someone could have intervened in ways that looking back would have been better for you, more supportive for you, that would now be your preferences. That could super well inform an advanced statement. I just love the idea of a tool like this, a smart tool like this, informing us to better use legal frameworks available to us in the benefit of our future treatment.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Thank you so much. Okay, let's have a look at another question, shall we? We've got a couple more minutes left. Okay, so does the person need to be fully recovered from the last episode before using the tool with them? That's a great question. Simon Laxton, did you want to start us off with that question?
Yeah, that's Max Birch. He talks about doing it immediately, sort of after people have been acutely unwell. I think that's one of the things it's good to do it, and I'll talk to clients that I'm working with about that as well, why we're doing it at that phase. And generally, if you talk to clients about, well, Max talks about this thing being sealing over, where people don't want to go back to a traumatic episode or thing. The longer you leave it, the less inclined they are to do that. And also people's memories, they deteriorate. Clients, once you again just really involving them in why we're making these decisions and why we're doing this now, most people can accept that and understand that. But I've certainly done it with clients when, as we're going through it, and when you're asking, say, symptoms about when this stopped or when this stopped, there'll be that moment when they're going, well, it hasn't. And you're like, oh, okay, well, let's talk about that a little bit more. But so I've certainly done it with clients when there's been some lingering psychotic symptoms, but I'd say I wouldn't do it with clients when they're acutely unwell, just to wait until after that.
Yes. Clodagh, did you want to add to that one?
Yeah, I suppose I agree with Simon there. Doing it when a client isn't acutely well would be quite, and it could actually provoke more trauma and make the experience more traumatic. So I think definitely judging a situation when they're on the road to recovery would be a much more beneficial, I think, for their own retrospection as well, because they're able to look back and actually piece together the timeline. So
thank you. So look, we've probably got time for one more quick question. So let's have a look up on the screen. So the last question will be, can this model be used in non-clinical services? Melissa, Simon Cruz,
Oh,
start with you.
Yeah, look, just to
nodding.
start off with, I think, my sort of sense about this is we either use willy-nilly or we use actual frameworks. And my preference is always to be using frameworks. And I totally think this could be used in lots of different areas. And that's a big reason for, putting on this webinar today, is to show people what a great model it is and how practical it can be, and ideally I would love it to be able to be used by a great range and variety of people across various health and welfare fields, so long as they stick to the fidelity of the approach, that it's a genuine approach, it's non-judgmental, it's strengths and recovery focused. As long as we're sticking to those sort of fundamentals, I think yes, definitely.
Yeah. And I've used it in the clinic setting, and quite often you'll see me when I'm going out to see clients taking my kind of butcher's paper and my cards with me, so that we can do it in an environment where they feel more comfortable either. Yeah.
Melissa, would you like to give a kind of a last statement before we finish up today?
Maybe just one word of caution about settings. I wouldn't be doing it in a cafe. So I think sometimes we're really eager to do things in real world, natural environments, and you can have a general chat about how people are traveling while you have a cuppa in a busy cafe when eventually lockdown finishes and we're back in cafes. But this is a little bit deeper, and this is potentially raising some traumatic content. And so I just wouldn't be doing that where you're not guaranteeing someone's confidentiality and privacy and a bit of space, and you may just open a whole can of worms that someone feels really exposed. So I just think that those smart thinking about people's honouring people and having some space for them.
It's very portable though, isn't it? On the whole,
portable.
It's very
That's
portable.
good.
Model.
It's very portable.
Pen and paper and cards.
Yeah, pen and paper and cards.
All right. Well, let's launch our final survey. If you do have time, we would love your feedback. Hopefully it works. It looks like the Slido didn't work earlier, the poll. So hopefully this survey works. It should pop up for you. So please spend a couple of minutes giving us some feedback. We'd really appreciate it. So now we're going to play a small video. That'll be the outro, and it'll basically say where you can access this webinar to rewatch it, to share with colleagues, to get the printable cards. So I wanted to thank all my panelists today, and thank you for championing such a fantastic model that's so easily accessible. And I think this is a really powerful tool to use with people. So we hope you have a great day. Enjoy yourselves, take care, and goodbye. Thank you for watching the webinar today. We hope you enjoyed it. If you have any further questions, you can contact me at sarah.officer@svha.org.au. If you'd like to rewatch the webinar or share it with colleagues, it will be available on the Eastern Melbourne PHN website. Please allow at least 24 hours for us to upload it. The printable PDF version of the relapse cards and the PowerPoint slides will be there also. I'd now like to express my sincere gratitude and thanks to live streaming services who helped deliver this webinar to you today, and LVM Enterprises who both filmed and edited the demonstration. I highly recommend both of these companies. Please visit their websites for more details. I must say a huge thank you to the area mental health clinicians, Simon Laxton and Claude Byrne, who did such an exceptional job of acting and demonstrating the tool. Simon Laxton has been promoting and training clinicians in this tool for many years, and it has been a privilege to bring his passion to a wider audience. And a special thank you to Banyule Community Health Service, Nexus Dual Diagnosis Consultation Service, and Monash University, who supported and championed the creation of this resource. On behalf of the North East Mental Health Service Coordination Alliance, thank you for watching today. Goodbye, take care.